Okay, the best time of the day, tinker time. Woo! Alright, a lot of clutter, hard to pick out what's going on here, so let me simplify. Harbor Freight, when you buy their 300 watt kit, the kit includes two lights, which look like this, and those lights are made to work on 12 volts, but they come with what looks like a normal light socket, so they actually screw in. That's a little bit frightening because I don't think these are made to run on 110. Alright. Haven't tested that yet, don't want to let the smoke out. I kind of like these. These were the things that I thought, that's kind of dumb, I'm never going to use them. I end up using them a lot. Alright. I just don't like the overall, how should I say this? They work great, and they're a really easy way to get into 12 volt lighting and your solar system. So I'm not going to knock them in any way. I'm just going to modify them to work a little better for what I'm doing. All right. So here's the trick. They come with a 10-foot cord. I think it's 10 feet. The cord has an inline switch, so you can turn them on or off. And then they got this nice barrel jack on the end. Turns out this is the same size of barrel jack as a bunch of other stuff I'm using. So I've got male and female ends of this already. Cool. For instance, when I made this little Frankenlight, this is 3S, 3 times 4.2 volts for about 12.6 volts. Total 18650s, there's 3 in here. I've got an internal charging management board in here. And so I can use this as a light. Oops, one of these. There it is. So I epoxied right over the LED elements to sort of protect them. So I can turn them on or off. On the front, it's got the voltmeter, which shows 11.9. Now you can't see it. This doesn't work anymore. It quit the last time I took it apart, so I must have broke the lead off of it. Didn't notice it at the time. And I've got 2 barrel jacks that I melted in place with a soldering iron. Kind of a hack, but it worked. So the first switch controls this or this. It's off in the middle, on or on. All 3 of these are the same switch. So I honestly don't remember. Okay, this was the front, this one was the light, and the second position wasn't used. This one I think turns on both jacks or something like that. I had made it originally to take the screws off to take the batteries out, and then the last time I took it apart I just soldered all the batteries together. I've got a battery spot welder, so I just made it so I don't have to open it anymore. I can run 12 volts into here and charge them, and the internal battery management board takes care of that for me. It should also keep it from running down too dead. Great little addition to my collection, and since it uses the same jack as the Harbor Freight lights, now I've got a nice portable light. Oh, wait, hang on. Turn on the switch. Yep, there we go. All right. So the inline switch works, and I can turn it off from here. All right. Now, what I've been doing a lot in the bus to save power is I figured out if I dimmed the lights, I'd get them to run for longer because I don't always need full brightness. Okay. This turns out to be a really great little dimmer. No idea if I can see what I'm doing here, so let's check. Yep. Okay, we're right in the shot. That's good. I think that means 8 amps. So it says DC 12-24V dot 8A. Okay. So DC 12 to 24 volts. That seems okay. Now, is that 0.8 amps or is it 8 amps? I'm not sure. I didn't see an obvious answer to that on the website. This I found on eBay. Several sellers are selling them. They're probably all coming from the same place, and then they're just knocking them out. All right. This one's got a SKU number on it and so on, LED, blah, blah, blah. All right. What's nice is they got screw terminals on here. Thing to watch out for, in, out, minus, positive, positive, minus. So watch your polarity when you hook it up, not a big deal, just pay attention to it. This does not have a click for off, but if you go all the way off, the light does go off. And it's nice, smooth variable all the way about 270 degrees. So you got a lot of fine tuning there. These were a little bit more expensive. I don't remember the price, but if you look on eBay, PWM pulse width modulation dimmer LED, you'll find it. And if it looks like this, it's probably the same light dimmer. Okay. this works with LEDs. It also worked good with my computer fans. And on the Mr. Heater mod that I made with the heat shield, I used one of these to speed control a computer case fan to get the right speed on the fan. Okay. I like these, but they're kind of big, and you got to mess around with the screw terminal. Again, not a big deal. If it's not going to be something you're changing very much, you just strip the wire, stick it in there, maybe tin it a little bit, screw it down, boom, you're done. Okay. Rock solid. Haven't had any problem with any of these. I might have smoked one now that I say that. I don't remember if it was one of these or not, but I tried to run a motor that was too much power. I probably pulled too many amps. It may not have been one of these. I remember smoking something. Letting the smoke out, I should say. I don't normally smoke these things personally, but anyway, so that is that. Now, the next thing I found when I was looking to buy more of these, I found these. This is also an LED dimmer, 12 volts in, 12 volts out. Doesn't say amp rating. Actually, it's 12 to 24 volts input and then output. And it comes with barrel jacks pre-installed. Very cool. The only problem is, at least for my Harbor Freight lights and most of the things I'm using, I need input and output reversed. So I've already done this one. So if you notice, the input has the male end, output has the female end. This has already been reversed. At first I was hoping perhaps the first one I grabbed was backwards, and it looks like they're all wired the same way. You may get lucky and have one that's wired quote unquote backwards. And this would totally depend on your application. So don't say that it's backwards, say that I'm backwards. But everything I've done, I had a female end in my battery, and I want the other way for output. All right. So let me show you one. This is a pretty simple operation to switch it. Also, this gives you an option that you could take off the barrel jacks completely if you chose to. All right. So what I did, I just grabbed a screwdriver. This is simple Phillips. I just happen to have a nice one, but you know, Phillips P1 would probably fit this about right. It's a little bit small for a P2. All right, spin out 4 screws. Off camera, I'm going to turn on my soldering iron real quick. I'm working outside off grid, so I'm using a butane soldering iron. If you're doing sensitive hydraulics, sensitive electronics, you'd probably want to do something with like a digital display that you can see how hot it is. Okay, 4 screws out. All 4 wires come in together right here. All you got to do is unsolder one pair and then switch them. Or, you know, unsolder all 4, move over and back. And this, ironically, it's probably very much on purpose. It's probably the same idea as what this one is, because blacks are on the outside, reds are on the inside. Alright, so I'm going to just pull these out of the strain relief. And what I did last time, so I don't get them confused, one, you pay attention to which one is which, but since that never works, just touch the pads and you're going to lift the wire off. Alright, one. I'm not screwing around with any desoldering because I'm just going to reuse the solder that's on that pad there. Okay, so now I'm going to move the red over one spot. Bring it over, touch it on, blow on it a little bit. Okay, I was a little bit too slow, so I'm going to hit that again. Too slow or too fast, depending on how you look at it. I'm juggling here just a little bit. If I had a proper third set of hands, which is a product that I might own somewhere. This worked really good on the first one, now I'm fiddly. Alright, settle down. There. I'm also being aware of where the ejection port is for the hot gas on this butane, because that'll burn your fingers pretty easy. Alright, melt. Hold it. That'll work. Okay, now we'll move the the second one over to the outside of the other side. And I know if you're watching this, you're probably better at this than I am, so thanks for noticing. My whole life I wanted to be able to do stuff like this. So finally, now that I'm 50, I've got almost enough money where I can afford to screw around with this kind of stuff. This is not especially expensive. It was just never in line with the other things I needed for survival usually. Alright, last one. Good, we're done. That's it. Just put the solder in iron off, set it aside. So now we've got, I'm going to put these back together. I'll come right back into the same strain gauge. Now here's the thing is, if you decided to rewire this, for instance, directly to your light appliance, or whatever you're using, typically your light, you could eliminate these wires, save them for something else, or take this whole thing apart and attach it to inside your case for whatever you're doing. Okay, now when I put this back together, I'm going to make sure that I put this in a way that the input and output are labeled correctly. Alright. This is probably symmetrical, seems to be. So if you happen to get it backwards, then your label will be backwards again. Alright. And yes, I did try it the other way. It doesn't work backwards. So the input has to have the 12 volts on it. I tried backwards and it didn't work. And before I took the time to do this, I actually made myself a set of male and female adapters so that I could test it to make sure that it would work with my lights before I took the time to unsolder this. And you know, by the time, I mean, a minute to resolder 4 joints, but half an hour to dig all my tools out again. Alright, so that's that one done. Let's just make sure it works. So I plug this into here, this end into the light that we already know works. Turn this on. There we go. Dimmable. Now obviously in broad daylight that's probably not obvious, but it is definitely dimming. And this dimmer has a positive off switch click. So they used a pot that had a nice click on it. Okay. Now I've got a light switch that's dimmable. Right? To go one step further, these lights are fairly easy to take apart. Alright, so I'm going to modify a few of them. So this literally, you just grab it and twist it. The front comes off. I actually like this. It makes a nice diffused light, but this is much thinner. Like literally that thick. Okay, this one they wired with 2 reds. So I'm going to reach in and snip it so I leave a little bit of wire available. Because I may decide I want to reuse this thing for something. So for now I'm just going to screw the lens back on so I don't lose it. One possible thing I'm going to do with this, my Bosch 18 volt NiCad flashlight has a lens that's very similar in size to this, and this fits perfectly inside of it. So I'm like, this is way more light than what comes off of the stock light bulb that comes with it, and these should last longer. Okay, that goes back in the box. Grab my stripper. Clunk. Strip the ends just a little bit. Now, you're probably aware that LEDs have to be wired the correct way. The center pod, or center pad, is positive, and the outer one is negative. So negative and positive, even though they're both red. All right. All we got to do then, what I did is I took apart the wiring that came with the Harbor Freight switch and just soldered it right onto that. That eliminates a lot of bulk. And I just had a fly try to buzz in my head. Alright, so you got rid of this. Where's the rest of that? And this whole socket. Alright. So I basically eliminated all of this, which in my bus, which has a 6-foot ceiling, this much was hanging down because I would just tape this to the ceiling and this whole thing hung down and I always kept hitting my head on it. So we get rid of that and we just have this. I'm going to take some double-sided sticky tape, stick it right on there, a little bit of electrical across these so they don't arc out, stick it right to the ceiling, and boom, I'm about 1/8 of an inch thick now. Less head injuries. Plus, wire a dimmer in line to that, and now I've got nice mood lighting. Now, no, I don't really need mood lighting, but if I want to have enough light so I don't trip on everything but not be blasting it away, I can run this down to about 25%. My batteries will last a lot longer then. Alright, that's the dream. So I'm going to solder up a couple of these. The other thing is, it doesn't really hurt my feelings to have this thing be 10 feet long, but I'm going to walk around for a little bit with my tape measure and figure out, can I make a couple 6-footers and put them where I want them, and then have the two 10-footers more towards the front and the back of the bus, and see if I can get it to a spot where I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I made one cut where I've got, this is about over 8 feet long. I got a barrel jack, no switch, and a bare end. I'm going to solder that directly onto one light. Okay, that's about 8 feet long. And I was kind of looking at where I wanted to put the lights. 6 feet didn't put me in a good spot, so I figured I'd make one long. Now what I've got this connector, which I may leave on for one of these at least. I've got 6 or 8 of these. But that gives me, from the light to the switch, is about 42 inches. And then from the switch to the end I cut, it's about another 3 feet, it looks like. Yeah, right at 3 feet. Okay. So, let's see, which one to do first. Okay, I'm going to do the light one first, and that one I can plug into one of the dimmers I've made. And I think what I'm going to do, I've got a bunch of these dimmers now, so I'm going to modify one dimmer, take off the output side, and solder this light directly to it. Yeah, that makes sense. Alright, so let's do this. Find the end. I always coil it up neatly and somehow it ties itself in knots anyway. I don't know why I even bother. Alright, so gentle pressure, put the knife down and just roll it a couple times, and that'll score through your rubber. And if you're really careful, you won't cut all the way in, such that, like now, it hasn't cut all the way through, so that way I know I didn't nick my inside wires. So if I bend it to where I can see it, I'm not going to spend the time getting really good close-ups here for you, but now I can scratch it under pressure and it should just open right up. The idea is you want to be able to get the sheathing off the outer layer without mangling your wire on the inside. If you do cut through into the wire where you can see the actual copper, just cut it off and go an inch shorter and try again. But if you're gentle, you can get the outer one off without cutting into the inner one. Alright? Alright, so what we're going to do, we're just going to strip these ends. Damn flies. Don't they know it's still March? If you got a favorite set of strippers, stay with them. I happen to like these and they were really cheap. Alright, turn on the soldering iron. Now, should be able to just unsolder these and reuse, just solder right to the pads. So I'm going to do that this time. The last one I spliced it and then I had to deal with a bare spot there, so not as cool. Just putting a little bit of pressure on the wire and then I'll heat it up, and when it melts I should be able to pull the wire right out, and I'll probably end up dropping this thing. But just like so. And these are marked, so I don't have to worry about which one is which. good to check before you take something apart so you know which one is which. Okay, now in a perfect world that solder would have came off and left me a hole. This is not the perfect world. Okay, center one is positive. Let's see if I can get this to work. I'm not exactly optimistic about this. But if I set the end of the wire into the hole and hold it, I might be able to heat up the other side. Maybe. This is where your desoldering would be a good idea, which I do not have. I do have solder wick somewhere, I just don't know where it's at. Alright, that probably won't work. Hey, there's a hole. Set it down. Now we get to blow up a little bit of solder on there. That's my finger. Good. Same on the other one. We'll just keep flipping the solder off until we get a hole. Yeah, you missed it. There was a B-1 bomber flying over earlier today. He didn't go right over us this time though. I say that because I could hear a jet, but he's probably an airliner. They're a lot higher. Okay, there's a hole. Give this a twist. Slide it through the hole. Try again. At this range, we don't got to be super precise. We just got to get it enough connectivity to make a couple LEDs come on. We're not pulling high amps here. This is just fiddly enough. I might just cut and splice the wire next time. Alright, here we go. Solder them on and then we'll trim the ends off. Like I always say, heat up the part and let the part melt the solder. Don't heat the solder directly, it'll make a better joint. Wherever they are. Alright, shut the tip off. The nice thing about butane soldering, it heats up really quickly. So if you turn it off in between and save yourself a little bit of butane, you're not wasting a lot of time waiting for it. I left those pretty long, so just trim them off. These are edge trimmers, let you cut really down flat. This is not a particularly good pair, but they do work. Good, okay, so just to know that it works, make sure I'm on the right one, we'll just plug it in, switch on, look at that, nice. Good, oops, I keep bumping the switch for the other one. Alright, so that's a straight one. And then, let's see. On this one, I'm going to wire it right to a dimmer so that I've got a bulb on a dimmer. Basically the same idea as what you've already seen. So I'm going to strip this wire first, same way what I just showed you, roll it with the knife. I'm going to keep this one a little bit shorter though. I've got about 7 extra feet, so if I nick the wire I'll just cut it off and try again. Okay, I can already see a bit of the wire. The good part, not the copper. So we'll bend it. Slice it gently. A little more bend, a little more slice. And if you're the kind of spaz like I am, you'll end up with something like that, which is a nice blister. Not from soldering though. I grabbed a hot stove off, or hot pan off the stove, not thinking. The handle was too close to the flame and that sucker was hot. Thumb didn't blister, thankfully, but finger did. Good, alright. I'm going to shortly strip these. And what I'll do is I'll pre-tin these when I get down to soldering, and then I can just touch them right on. And I'm going to leave the switch in line with these. These switches, I've taken them apart before, and you can just get a knife or a screwdriver in here and pop it apart. They can usually be opened and then closed again. And what it's supposed to be, typically the black wire would be continuous and the red wire would be through the switch, so that you don't have two wires spliced inside. It's just the one. At least the one I looked at. Not the expert. Okay. Same thing. We're just going to take the screws out of here. I know I'm all in the shadow. Sorry. Screws in there so we can lose them all at the same time. Soldering iron on. Sometimes if you're fast enough, at least this one, this is a, where's the brand name on it? It's a Weller butane powered soldering. I've noticed that, I don't know what keeps it going, but the part that keeps it going is hot enough that if you shut it off and then within a minute or two turn it on again, it'll relight itself. You don't have to hit the ignition on it. Which these, you just pull the sparker down and it lights. And there's a little hole there that turns red. I don't know if it's visible in the sunlight, but okay. So all of these are going to get undone. So I'm going to pull this one off first because I'm not going to use it. So a little bit of up pressure while I'm heating it, and it'll pop right off. Up pressure, I'm literally lifting up gently on the wire such that when it gets warm enough to melt the solder, it just pops right up just like that. Okay, this one I'm not going to use, so I'll throw that in my box of wonders. And then we'll undo this one. I'm going to pull the black off first and move it over. And I'm kind of being methodical so I don't get confused which one is which. I can always look at the next one, but if I can get it right, it's easier. Laziness pays off immediately. Okay, that's a good joint. I'm not adding any solder or any flux, I'm just warming it up. It's already got enough solder on there. That way these wires are pre-tinned. I'm going to straighten that and not burn myself, hopefully. Good. Touch it down, a little bit of heat, let it turn liquid. Let it flow off. Blow it till it turns dull. Good enough. Alright. Now, this wire hasn't been soldered before, so I'm going to dip it. I've got some liquid flux over here because the solder that I have, I accidentally bought solder that does not have the flux core. And I've heard a lot of discussion either way, but I guess if you're doing nice electronics, you could probably do solder without flux and then add your own flux, I guess is the idea. So I'm going to pre-tin these wires so that I can just touch them on there and they'll go. And I guess the solder makes things flow better. That's been my experience. If I don't, the flux, if I don't get flux on a joint, the solder just sits there, doesn't seem to flow in. The flux makes it all gooey when you're done, but that's, I guess, what flux cleaner is for, which I also don't have. Someday. I'm just happy to have a soldering iron I can use outside in the sunshine. Day like today, this is awesome. Oh, hot, hot, hot. That should be fine. Alright. Gas off. trimmer, clean up, because I left it over far enough that it'll probably hit that contact if it bumps it. So I'll just trim it off, make it look nice and neat. I don't really care personally if it looks nice and neat. However, if it is nice and neat, that tends to work better. That's been my experience. So, and I kind of learned that from working on aircraft. If something looks nice, very likely it'll work better. Now, I don't have strain relief on this end, which would be a nice idea. I'm not going to take the time to tie a knot in that, but I'm thinking about it. Okay, input now is this way, so I'm going to turn this around so that my label faces the input, just so that I can look at it later and probably assume I can put this one together. I'll put it together. Now what I could do is remove the inline switch, because the dimmer has a click on switch. Also, the circuit I'm going to plug this into has its own switch, which has a breaker built in. It's a breaker switch, which is really nice. Way overkill for what I'm doing here, but it's nice to know that, you know, if something shoots through the wiring, it might have some electrical protection. Okay, I'm going to take a light, put it back in the socket, so I can see when it works. Okay, that should be off. I'm going to plug it in here, turn it on. I think that's on. Other way is on. There we go. Okay, switch was on and then I turned it off. So again, dimming, off, on. And what's kind of nice is if I decide to, I can just turn off the circuit, shut the light off, turn it back on, it'll come back on to the same point. Also, I've got an inline light switch that's separate from the dimmer, so I can just turn it off. It'll come back on to the same brightness. Or I could turn it off. Realistically, I could probably take this switch out. So on the other ones, I probably will. So I'm going to leave these together. And that's basically the three combinations, I guess. So, you know, I guess my point is, if you have a Harbor Freight kit, these come apart, and you can use them for other things. All right. For example, I mentioned the flashlight. I think I might do one of those now, because it's, you know, 3:30 and I got nothing else to do today. So I try to book my days off with lots of things to do, and now this one's not going to open. All right. Grab the next one. There we go. Yeah, cool. So, same thing, I'll just reach inside, snip the wire. Make myself some leads. Alright, and we're back. You may think I have an obsession or fascination with flashlights, and you'd be kind of right. The deal is, out here, I have virtually no light from the neighbors. I don't have street lights out here. It is right frickin' dark after sunset, or, you know, when the sun goes down or whatever. So it becomes an issue where you really want to have some good flashlights. So one of the ones that I found, and I was really excited about these, are these. And let's see, where's my flashlight? Let's actually get it on frame. Here we go. I can't see my viewfinder hardly out here. All right, good. So these I found at Walmart. I want to say less than $4 a piece, probably $3 a piece. They're very cool. They got a hook on them, they've got a magnet on them, and they use AAA batteries ×3. Now, do the math. 1.5 times 3 is about 4.5. All right. Check this out. AAA batteries go dead way too fast. However, a single 18650 with a little bit of tweaking will fit in here. Now this one was part of a Frankenlight that I made before I moved out here, and I had 3D printed the back of it and then made a base for it and actually had it sitting on a pivot base that had magnets built into that, so I could stick it. Now in a school bus, the entire inside is magnetic, so I can just take this, stick it to the ceiling, and it'll stay there for a while. However, this is probably not everybody's situation, but in Texas, especially at the ceiling, I had enough heat that the glue holding this magnet in would melt. The whole light would fall down and typically break, and I'd come home and I'd see a light on the floor and a magnet stuck to the ceiling. All right, kind of a buzzkill. Winter, I didn't have that problem, but now that it's getting warm, these are going to start falling again. So, first, you take an 18650. I wired it with a barrel jack. I have a charger circuit that I can just plug into this and recharge it off of USB. Very cool. So what I'm building towards, again, I started doing this and then I stopped for a while. I'm going to make a few more of these. I found more of these at Walmart. This is similar to the one at Harbor Freight, but this is way brighter. These are much nicer LEDs. The one at Harbor Freight has a bunch more littler ones. It still works, but this is just brighter. It's also got the light on the end. Okay. I just happen to like this one a little bit better than the Harbor Freight one. Personal preference. Well, it's brighter, so it is. But anyway, if you can't find these, the ones at Harbor Freight, you can do the same thing. So you just take it apart, a couple screws, just work your way through it, and figure out which is red and black. I used a cell holder on this one. I may just, because I've got a spot welder for battery cells, I may just solder it together. What I'm doing though is instead of putting the charging circuit in the light, I'm just running the barrel jack right to the battery, or in this case the battery holder, and then I'll take a charging circuit and put another barrel jack on it. And so I still have a charging circuit, but it's not in the light, it's in the pigtail. So I can have one charger that I can charge multiple lights one at a time, instead of having every one of these where I have to plug it into a USB port. Okay. So that's that. To take one of these apart, this is what you end up with. Two leads, I labeled them positive, negative. The switch, I took off the light on the end. This makes a really nice flat light that runs at 5 volts. Now, beyond cool, I've got up here shining out the window. Yeah, there you go, middle of frame. That's one of those lights wired to a long wire that goes back to my battery bank that has a 12 volt to 5 volt down converter that's rated at 3 amps. At the moment, I've only got one of those wired, but it's an easy enough thing that's on my list for a day like today. Probably not today, but a day like today. Go ahead and wire some more of those and set them up, because what I could do then, another airliner just went right over us, only up high. Put a few of those out there, they only run on 5 volts. I could then either make an 18650 battery pack that was, say, 5 or 6 in parallel and run them as is, or use a down converter from 12 volts down to 5 and run all of them 1 or 2 circuits. So I might have a 5 volt converter for the left side and a 5 volt for the right side. Then I'll wire it up as outside camp lights. Okay, so that's one way to go about it. So a lot of these that broke, or all of the ones that broke, I took apart, saved the pieces for that kind of a project. So the one that's up on in the window there, I removed the switch and ran a wire across it so that it would just stay on, and then ran it to an external switch that comes in and turns it on, and you're done. That one I didn't even use the reflectors because it didn't seem to make that much difference, and it made it super thin. I just made a little box out of cardboard, taped it to the window, and left it. 6 months later, it's been working fine. Every time I walk outside, I hit that switch that lights up this whole area out here.